say like, hey, here's the steps that we need to take to get you to buy that item in the next 4 to 6 months, right? How much do you need to set aside each week, each month? What does that look like? Help them start getting the ball rolling on what that looks like. And then once they're getting a little bit older, you can start to implement more practices. And hopefully once they get to the point when they're getting jobs of their own, then you can really help to kind of bring it all and tie it all in together, instead of just doing what most people do and just waiting until they're already in that position and then trying to hammer those principles into their mind. At that point, it's going to be much more difficult than if you had all along been teaching them these principles every single step of the way. So third, welcome to the Home Goals Podcast, the ultimate guide for turning your home goals into reality. I'm your host, Derek Thornton. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of obtaining a home, where we offer expert tips, helping you avoid pitfalls, and championing your journey towards that cherished place to call home. In this week's episode, we will be discussing the topic around raising future homeowners, teaching your kids about real estate. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart as a father, but it's also something that I've always enjoyed just from a teaching aspect as well. I remember I had a friend of mine who's a teacher, and she asked me to come in and teach her middle schoolers about how real estate agents typically determine the value of a home, right? What do we do, what we pay attention to, what we factor in. I had an awesome time getting to do it, and it really kind of sparked something in me, and just being able to have fun teaching this, right? And even a few days ago, I went on a tour with some other realtors where we toured a middle school as well as a high school, and got to hear a presentation from the county school superintendent. And I noticed as I was walking the halls of one of the schools, they had a project that they were doing at the middle school where they basically said, hey, we're going to pretend like we're giving all the kids $100, and you have to take that $100 and figure out how you're going to do your grocery shopping for that week, right? So figure out what your meal plan is, and then map out exactly what you need to buy, and then list out all the different items on your grocery list, what the cost is for those items, and then at the end kind of write a little synopsis on how the experience went. Did you think that was enough money? Did you think it was too little? How can you work that around? Are you kind of eating beans and rice every night? Like, what does your plan look like after that fact? And they did their research, right? I remember several of them had outrageous prices for eggs, and I was like, oh, okay, y'all know what's going on in present day with these grocery prices. And so I thought that was just an awesome project to do, and it really kind of reminded me that I needed to talk about this in my podcast and just discuss things that I would recommend as a realtor and as a father, things that I would recommend that you take the time to talk to your kids in teaching them about real estate. It is never too early. And these are practices and principles that you really want to instill in them as early as you possibly can, right? You don't want it to be a situation where they wait until after college and everything else, and they finally are out in the real world before they finally start to learn some principles for getting ready for a house. The earlier they can get prepared and ready to do these things, the more they're going to be in a best position possible when it is time for them to make that decision, to make that purchase and really benefit themselves, right? It is one of the most important resources and assets and positions that they can be in to be a homeowner, to have land that they can call their own, right? And so you want to be able to instill those factors into your own kids, right? So whether you have kids right now or whether you would like to have kids someday, I think that this will be a great episode that you can really learn. And I've really broken it down into 5 different things that I think that every parent should do in their practice of raising these future homeowners. So the first one that we're going to go into is just a very simple one. Make it relatable, right? When you're trying to teach them about this process, make it in stories and examples that they can relate to and that they're used to. One thing that I think a lot of parents kind of drop the ball or fall short on is they will tell the kids about these things once they're ready to make the purchase, but they've never had these discussions beforehand, right? And so show them real world examples, right? Show them what your mortgage looks like. Show them what your different home buying experience was, right? When you went to purchase a home, show them what it's like. Right? There were a lot of stories about my own parents' home buying experience that I didn't hear until I was already a grown married adult and had a house of my own, right? Those are stories where I was like, oh man, I had no idea that you guys had to do that or that you went through that. And so talk to them about what the experience was like for you, what you went through, what you expected, what surprised you. All those things are things that you want to talk about. Your kids are wanting to hear these stories, right? My kids are 9, 6, and 2, and my 9 and 6-year-old, they're constantly asking us stories about like, hey, what happened when you did this, or what happened when you did that? And so don't just make the assumption that your kids aren't going to care about it. These are things that, like I said, are very much important to them in the way that they have the life that they have and what they've experienced. So talk to them about certain experiences and try to put the examples in terms that they can understand in ways that make sense to them, right? Explaining to them, hey, like, we had to risk losing money in certain cases to be able to buy the house, or hey, when we made this or when we signed this contract, we were bound and we had to do this, right? Letting them know like what type of responsibilities come into play when they make certain decisions, and understanding what all is going into those decisions, right? And just making it something that really clicks and resonates with where they are in their life, right? And so whether you got a preschooler, elementary or high schooler, like I said, make it in terms that they can understand, make it relatable to them. Number 2, introduce them to basic money management. You don't want to overwhelm them with a billion different spreadsheets and templates and all these formulas and things that you may go into, but just give them just some basic budgeting tips for getting ready. I remember, I wish I had taken the advice, but I didn't. But I remember one real estate investor giving advice in college and saying like, hey, if you can just set aside $100 a month and put that into an investment, right? Maybe like a mutual fund or something like that, but just setting aside $100 a month, you will be in a significantly better position than many of your peers and friends when you look up maybe 10 years from now, right? You'll already have a head start on a lot of the things that many people are trying to do. Just $100 a month. I had jobs that I was working while I was in school, but my bills were still very minimal in a lot of cases, right? There was a lot of months where if I had not or chosen not to go to the movies or chosen not to go out to eat all those different times, I could have easily saved at least $100 a month that I just tucked away, forgot about it, and just kept going on about my life. And then when it was time for me to purchase a home or to get into real estate or all these other big decisions that I needed to make that required some funding, I would have had those funds already sitting there, already ready to go. I would have had a head start on even saving up for retirement, right? But introduce them to those basic skills of figuring out what the expenses are, how to budget their money, and how to set that up, and letting them know. And you can, again, put it in terms that they can understand, right? If they receive some money for their birthday or something, or they receive money for an item, you can let them know like, hey, here's how you can set aside funds, right? For us, we're in a Christian household, so we believe in tithing. We'll tell them, hey, set aside some money for tithing, set aside some for saving, and set aside some for spending. Again, your kids are going to want to keep track of these things. It doesn't matter the age at a very early age, they're going to catch on to the importance of money, and you want them to have as early as possible concepts of how it all works out. My kids, they received some money for Christmas, and we had gone to Disney World, and they were constantly, and I mean constantly, asking, well, Dad, can I spend some of the money here? Okay, well, how much money left do I have now? Okay, well, what if I buy this toy? Okay, well, how does that work? Like, sit down and actually write the plan out with them, and I guarantee you it will start to click in their minds, especially when it's their money, right? If you can have money that they received from a birthday or Christmas, or money they received for chores or allowance, if you do that in the household as well, help them understand how to budget those items out, how to set some aside for savings, and teach them how to save up in the long term, right? So say like, hey, maybe there's a toy or a really expensive item that you want to get. Say like, hey, here's the steps that we need to take to get you to buy that item in the next 4 to 6 months, right? How much do you need to set aside each week, each month? What does that look like? Help them start getting the ball rolling on what that looks like. And then once they're getting a little bit older, you can start to implement more practices. And hopefully once they get to the point when they're getting jobs of their own, then you can really help to kind of bring it all and tie it all in together, instead of just doing what most people do and just waiting until they're already in that position and then trying to hammer those principles into their mind. At that point, it's going to be much more difficult than if you had all along been teaching them these principles every single step of the way. So third one is involve them in home maintenance. Now, this is, I want you to take this particular tip with a grain of salt, right? I don't want you to say like, hey, we're going to go out and change the water heater out, right? I don't want you to do any major repairs with them, especially if you're not qualified to do those things. These are just smaller projects around the house, right? Maybe changing out a door lock or something like that. Just smaller items or fixes around the house. Involve them in that so that they can get a feel for what it takes to help maintain and upkeep a home and get a better sense of what all goes into that. But then also, even a step past that, you can even help them or bring them alongside you when you're paying the utility bills, right? And seeing like, hey, here's what it takes to upkeep this house once we actually get the home, right? Because a lot of the advice and things that we're talking about are typically revolved around just getting the home to begin with, right? So saving up for the down payment, what's your monthly mortgage payment going to look like? A lot of that stuff we discuss, but we often leave out, okay, once you got the home, now what are the things that you need to keep in mind? What are the things that you need to make sure that you're keeping that home updated and regularly maintained, so that when you eventually go to sell it someday, you're not losing a ton of funds because you just kept it in horrible disarray and horrible condition, not really having that, right? So help them to see, right? And again, those real world examples will really help drive the point home. You often hear parents, complaining about, oh man, these kids are running in and out of my house, leaving the doors open, they're turning on all the lights, they're running this water for so long, but they don't actually show the kids the utility bills, right? Show them utilities, show them the consequences of the things that you are complaining about, right? When they took that 45-minute shower, or they left their window open all day and didn't tell you, right? Show them how there's spikes in those bills and in those utilities, and compare that to like the money that they have, right? If you show them, hey, you know how you've been working hard for these last several months to save up a few $100s? Well, that is 1 month's worth of electricity for this house, right? Drive home that point so that they can really see in real time how these things all impact the household. And that's going to be a huge advantage for them once they get out on their own, right? So bring them in on those small fixes and also help them to see those utility bills. That's the third one. Involve them in the home maintenance. 4, take them to open houses. Now, this one might be more controversial. I know a lot of people are thinking like, I'm not bringing my little kids to an open house. Like that just sounds terrible. Like they're going to be running all over the place. I'm going to have to worry about them breaking stuff, getting stains on items. Yes, that is a very real possibility. I have little ones at the house myself. I understand how that goes, but I also understand too that it can be a valuable opportunity for them. And so like, you could try to work your way up to that, right? Like if you know your kids are a little bit wilder on the side, you might say like, okay, before we go to an open house, let's just see if we can just walk through an aisle in Pier 1 Imports and see if they don't break anything, right? Let's do that first, and then we can go see if we can walk through another house that has staging or furniture and stuff like that in there, but really helping give them that practice, right? I don't want you to just completely toss out the whole experience because you're scared that they might mess some things up, but take them through those open houses and really get them an idea of like, hey, here's how pricing works. Here's how the condition of the home, the location, all these different factors that we as adults all know are crucial to a home's value, but they may not understand that, right? Until they actually see it in real life. And so taking the open houses can be a great way to do that. And you can set up the experience to kind of play to whatever things they enjoy most, right? And so your kids better than anyone else, right? I know, for example, my daughter, she loves to shop. She loves to look at different stores and see pretty things. She loves to decorate and stuff. And so for her, I might say, hey, let's go to this open house so we can look at all the different homes, see the staging, see how things look. And you might get some ideas for your own room that you want to make changes to. But you can kind of see how they prepare a home to sell and market it and how that factors into the overall value. For my son, he really can't stand shopping and anything like that, or like looking around. So he would probably get bored looking at a home, but he loves math. And so for him, I might take the opposite approach where I say, hey, instead of focusing on all the staging and all that stuff like that, instead, let's take a look at, just take a general overview of this house and let's see if we can guess what the value of this home is, right? Let's not look at in the marketing materials. Let's just see if just looking at the location, the condition of the house, take a look at those things and let's play a little game and see if we can guess what the value of this home is, right? Figure out ways that you can make it applicable to what your kid enjoys. But again, take them into the open houses, give them those real life, real world examples of what a home looks like so that they can get a feel for it themselves and start to get an idea of what they would want to look for when it comes time for them to purchase. And then the last one is just emphasize the long-term benefits, right? There's so many benefits to homeownership, but really emphasize the long-term portion of it, so long-term benefits. Most of the time when we're looking at things, especially kids tend to be very short-term in their thinking, right? They're thinking about the immediate impact. And if we're being honest, there's a lot of adults that still have that mindset as well. But usually they tend to think of things in the short term, right? Dave Ramsey always is saying that, adults devise a plan and follow it. Children do what feels good, right? And so, like I said, they're more concerned with the short-term benefits, but you really want to help drive home the impact or the benefits in the long term when it relates to home ownership, right? So showing them, hey, here's the difference between if you were to own a home and make those payments versus if you were renting. Or here's how things would be different in you building your home equity, right? Or here's the stability that you would have in place, right? You're not having to constantly worrying about the cost of the rent going up every single year. You're not having to worry about potentially moving, right? And again, I would take this right back to real world examples, right? There were several times when my wife and I first got married, there were several times where we moved locations just because the rent was going up so much that we couldn't justify it anymore, right? And so there was always that nervous feeling we'd get whenever it was time for our lease renewal because we didn't know how much the rent is going to go up, if it's going to be worth it, if we're going to have to go through the process of moving, touring other apartments all over again. That just not having that feeling anymore makes owning a home so much better, right? And so to have those conversations with your kids, let them know the long-term benefits from a practical standpoint, but also from an emotional one, right? Knowing that, like, hey, we're not having to worry about uprooting you from a school every single time or every single year. We're not having to worry about all that and making sure that they understand what the consequences would be if we were renting or if we were staying in a short-term situation versus having established roots in a home that we own. Again, it's not going to come by just happenstance that they learn these principles, that they learn these materials. These are things that you really have to be intentional about teaching them, but it is going to have huge benefits for them, especially if they can learn it earlier on in life. And so I want to just put that out there again. Conversations are crucial, and having them early can make all the difference and make sure that your kids are set up to win. I hope that was helpful for you all. Keep those tips and those plans in mind. Again, we'll go right back through them again. 1, make it relatable. 2, introduce them to basic money management. 3, involve them in home maintenance. 4, take them to open houses. And 5, emphasize the long-term benefits. Those are just a few steps that you can take that can make a dramatic impact in making sure that you are raising future homeowners. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next week.